What would you do if someone mocked you on stage, especially if that person looked dangerous, especially if 200 people were watching? In 1948, in Memphis, Louis Armstrong faced this question, and the answer he gave was one of the things that made him a legend. That evening, Louis was playing at a small club, not a big concert hall, just a venue for 200 people. But for Louis, every stage mattered. Every audience was valuable. Every performance was an opportunity to pour out his soul. The concert was going beautifully. People were dancing, applauding. They were swept up in Louis' music. Then Louis started one of his favorite songs, "When the Saints Go Marching In." That song was special to Louis because it came from New Orleans. It came from his childhood, from funerals, from celebrations, from every moment of life. When Louis played that song, he was going home, returning to his heart. He reached the song's climax, the highest note, the most powerful moment. Right at that instant, a laugh rose up, mocking, merciless, deliberate. Louis was shocked. He stopped the music and he saw. At the back of the room stood a man, grinning and shouting loud enough for everyone to hear. "Funny? So funny! This guy's the world's best musician!" The room went silent. Fear hung in the air because everyone knew that man. He was known in the neighborhood. He was dangerous, the troublemaking type. And now he was mocking Louis Armstrong. Louis had two choices: ignore it or respond. Louis chose a third way. And that way became history. Before we continue with this incredible story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. What you're about to witness is one of the most powerful moments in Louis Armstrong's career, a moment that shows not just his talent, but his extraordinary character and wisdom. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that March evening in Memphis, we need to go back several weeks. We need to understand the pressure Louis Armstrong was under in 1948. Because that moment on stage wasn't just about one mocking man. It was about a lifetime of people trying to diminish Louis, trying to break his spirit, trying to make him feel less than. And every time, Louis had refused. February 25th, 1948, New York City. Louis Armstrong sat in his manager's office, exhausted. He'd just finished a grueling 3-month tour across the Midwest, 30 cities, 47 shows, barely any rest between. Performances. His lips were cracked and bleeding from constant trumpet playing. His body ached. His spirit was worn thin. But his manager, Joe Glazer, had more bookings lined up. "Louis, we've got Memphis next month, then Atlanta, then New Orleans. The demand for you is incredible." Louis loved performing. It was his life, his passion, his purpose. But by 1948, Louis was 47 years old. He'd been performing professionally for over 25 years. The constant touring, the pressure to always be on, the exhaustion of traveling while black in segregated America, it all took its toll. What most people didn't understand about Louis Armstrong's life in the late 40s was the invisible burden he carried. On stage, he was Satchmo, always smiling, always energetic, always making people happy. But off stage, Louis dealt with things that would have broken most people. Hotels that wouldn't accept him despite him being the headline performer. Restaurants that wouldn't serve him, venues that made him enter through the back door, critics who accused him of being too entertaining, not serious enough, not militant enough in fighting racism. Louis had developed his own way of handling racism, not through confrontation, though he had his moments, but through excellence, through being so undeniably talented that people had to respect him, through maintaining his dignity even when others tried to strip it away. But it was exhausting. By February 1948, Louis was tired, not just physically, spiritually. He'd been fighting his whole life, fighting poverty as a child in New Orleans, fighting for recognition as a young musician, fighting racism throughout his career, and the fight never ended. That's what Joe Glazer didn't understand when he kept booking more shows. For Joe, it was business. For Louis, every performance was a battle to prove himself, a battle to maintain dignity, a battle to show the world that black artistry was equal to any. March 3rd, 1948. Louis boarded a train to Memphis. He traveled with his band, 5 musicians who'd been with him for years. They were like family. They understood the pressure Louis was under. On the train, Louis was quiet. His trumpet player, a young man named Henry, noticed. "Boss, you okay?" Louis smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just tired, Henry, just tired." But it was more than tiredness. Louis was questioning things. Was all this worth it? The constant travel? The performance after performance? The smile he had to maintain even when he didn't feel like smiling? Louis looked out the train window at the passing landscape and wondered if maybe it was time to slow down. Maybe it was time to rest. Memphis in March. 1948 was a city of contradictions. On one hand, it had a thriving music scene. Beale Street was legendary. Blues, jazz, gospel all flourished there. On the other hand, Memphis was deeply segregated. The Jim Crow laws were rigidly enforced. Black performers could play for white audiences but couldn't eat in the same restaurants or stay in the same hotels. Louis and his band checked into the Colored Musicians Hotel on Beale Street. It was a modest place, nothing like the grand hotels where white performers stayed, but it was clean, safe, and welcoming. The owner, Miss Sarah, had known Louis for years. "Mr. Armstrong, so good to see you again," she said warmly. "Your room's ready. You need anything, you just let me know." Louis appreciated her kindness. After weeks of cold receptions and hostile stares in other cities, Miss Sarah's genuine warmth was healing. That evening, Louis and his band had dinner at a small restaurant near the hotel. The food was good, the atmosphere relaxed. For the first time in weeks, Louis felt like he could breathe. Henry raised his glass. "To a good show tomorrow night." Everyone echoed the toast, but Louis remained quiet, lost in thought. The next day, March 17th, started normally enough. Louis woke up, had breakfast, rehearsed with his band in the hotel's small music room. They ran through the set list for that evening's performance. "When the Saints Go Marching In," "Muskrat Ramble," "West End Blues," all Louis's classics. Around noon, Louis took a walk down Beale Street. He liked to get a feel for a city before performing. Memphis had energy. Music poured out of clubs even during the day. Street musicians played on corners. The air smelled like barbecue and possibility. But Louis also noticed the undercurrent of tension. Police watched black pedestrians with suspicious eyes. White shopkeepers locked their doors when black customers approached. The segregation was oppressive, hanging over everything like a dark cloud. That afternoon, Louis returned to the hotel and tried to rest. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept churning with thoughts about his career, about racism, about whether his approach of smiling and performing was making a real difference. Some younger black musicians criticized Louis. They said he was too accommodating to white audiences, that he should be more confrontational, more political, more angry. Louis understood their frustration, but he had his own philosophy. Change happened gradually. You couldn't force people to respect you. You had to earn it through excellence, through consistently showing up and being undeniable. But on that March afternoon in Memphis, lying in his hotel bed, Louis wondered if his philosophy was wrong. Maybe anger was the answer. Maybe confrontation was necessary. Maybe his smiling face was actually holding back progress. These thoughts plagued Louis as he prepared for the evening performance. At 6 p.m, Louis and his band arrived at the club. It was called the Blue Note, a small venue on the edge of Beale Street, 200 capacity, intimate. The kind of place where you could see every face in the audience. The club owner, a white man named Mr. Thompson, greeted Louis at the door. "Mr. Armstrong, honored to have you here. We've been sold out for weeks." Louis nodded politely, but he noticed that Mr. Thompson didn't shake his hand, didn't make eye contact for long. The respect was professional, not personal. The band set up their equipment, checked the microphones, tuned instruments. Louis held his trumpet, running through mental warm-ups. At 7:30, the doors opened. The audience filed in, a mix of people. Mostly white, but some black patrons in a designated section at the back, segregation even within the club. Louis watched from backstage, feeling the familiar knot in his stomach. Performing for segregated audiences never sat right with him. But what choice did he have? If he refused to play for segregated crowds, he'd barely work at all. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The announcer's voice boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Blue Note is proud to present the one and only Louis Armstrong." The crowd erupted in applause. Louis walked onto the stage, trumpet in hand, that famous smile on his face, but inside, he felt hollow. The first half of the show went well. Louis played beautifully. The audience responded enthusiastically. During Muskrat Ramble, people jumped to their feet, dancing in the aisles. Louis felt the music lifting his spirits. This was why he performed, the connection with the audience the joy music brought. For 45 minutes, Louis forgot his exhaustion, his doubts, his questions. There was only music. Then came intermission. Louis went backstage, drank some water, wiped the sweat from his face. His bandmates were energized. "Great crowd tonight, boss," Henry said. Louis nodded. "Yeah, good people." But as he prepared for the second half, Louis noticed something. Near the back of the club, a group of men had gathered. They were loud, drinking heavily. Their energy was different from the rest of the audience. Aggressive, confrontational. Louis had seen this before. Men who came to shows not for the music, but for the spectacle. Who saw black performers as entertainment, not artists. He took a deep breath and returned to the stage. The second half began with West End Blues, one of Louis's most technically challenging pieces. He played flawlessly, the trumpet notes soaring through the club. The audience was mesmerized. Then Louis transitioned into When the Saints Go Marching In. This was the moment, the emotional peak of the show, the song everyone waited for. Louis poured his heart into it. Every note carried the weight of his life, his childhood in New Orleans, his struggles, his triumphs, his hopes. The audience was with him, swaying, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Louis reached the climax, the highest note, the moment where everything came together, and that's when it happened. Have you ever been publicly humiliated? How did you respond? Share your experience in the comments. A laugh, loud, harsh, cutting through the music like a knife. Louis's concentration broke. He missed the note. The trumpet squeaked instead of soaring. Louis stopped playing. The band stopped behind him. The entire club went silent. Louis looked toward the source of the laughter. One of the men from the back section was standing. He was large, over 6 feet tall, leather jacket, scarred face, arms crossed, grinning. "This is the great Louis Armstrong," the man shouted. "I've heard better in my garage." Some people gasped. Others looked away, uncomfortable, but nobody said anything. Nobody challenged the man. Fear rippled through the room because anyone could see this man was trouble. Louis stood on stage, trumpet in hand, processing what just happened. His bandmates looked at him, waiting for direction. The club owner, Mr. Thompson, stood in the corner, frozen. 200 people held their breath. What would Louis do? This was the moment, the test. Louis could walk off stage. He could ignore the man and continue playing. He could call security, all valid responses. But Louis Armstrong didn't do any of those things. Instead, he did something that nobody expected, something that would be talked about for decades. Louis slowly lowered his trumpet. He walked to the edge of the stage, closer to the audience, closer to the man who'd mocked him. The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Louis looked directly at the man, not with anger, not with fear, with something else. Compassion, understanding, sadness. Then Louis spoke. His voice was calm, clear, carrying throughout the club without a microphone. "Sir, I don't know you, but I know something about you. You're hurting," the man's grin faltered. "What?" Louis continued, his voice gentle but firm. "You're hurting inside. And hurt people hurt people. I've seen it my whole life. When someone's in pain, sometimes they try to pass that pain to others. Make someone else feel small so they can feel big for a moment." The man's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about me." Louis nodded. "You're right. I don't know your story. I don't know what brought you to this club tonight. I don't know what burdens you carry. But I know this. You came here to hear music. And music, real music. It's not about me being great. It's about all of us being human together, sharing something that words can't express." Louis paused, letting his words settle. "When I play this trumpet, I'm not showing off. I'm sharing my soul. Every note comes from somewhere deep. From my mama, who worked herself to exhaustion. From my childhood when I was so poor I didn't know if I'd eat. From every time someone told me I wasn't good enough. From every moment of joy and every moment of pain. That's what music is. It's the human experience translated into sound." The man stood there, his bravado crumbling. Louis's words were stripping away his defenses. "And when you mock that," Louis continued, "you're not mocking me. You're mocking yourself, because whatever I feel, you feel too. We all do. That's what makes us human. Pain, joy, fear, hope. We all carry the same things, we just express them differently. Please subscribe to our channel if this story is moving you. Louis Armstrong's wisdom deserves to be shared, and your support helps us tell these important stories. Louis took a step closer. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish this song. I'm going to play it for you, not at you. For you. Because maybe, just maybe, somewhere in these notes, you'll hear something that speaks to what you're feeling. And maybe, just for a few minutes, you won't hurt so much. The club remained silent. The man stood there, his arms no longer crossed. His grin was gone. His eyes, which had been hard and mocking, now looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. Louis walked back to center stage. He raised his trumpet to his lips, and he played. But this time, it was different. The notes that came out weren't just technically perfect. They were transcendent. Louis was playing not just with his lips, but with his entire being. Every note carried the weight of what he'd just said, the pain he'd acknowledged, the humanity he'd affirmed, the connection he'd created. As Louis played, something extraordinary happened. The man who'd mocked him sat down, slowly, as if his legs couldn't hold him anymore, and tears began streaming down his face. He wasn't the only one. Throughout the club, people were crying, not sad tears, cathartic tears, the kind that come when something deep inside you is touched and opened. Louis finished the song. The final note hung in the air, pure and perfect. Then silence. For 5 full seconds, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then applause, but not regular applause. People stood, they clapped, they cheered, they cried. It went on for 3 full minutes. Louis stood on that stage, exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely at peace, because in that moment he'd done more than perform. He'd connected, he'd healed, he'd reminded everyone in that room, including himself, what it meant to be human. After the show ended, Louis went backstage. He sat in a chair holding his trumpet, processing what had just happened. His bandmates were in awe. "Boss, I've never seen anything like that," Henry said. "You turned that whole situation around." Louis smiled wearily. "I just told the truth. That's all any of us can do." About 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the dressing room door. Louis's road manager opened it cautiously. Standing there was the man, the one who'd mocked Louis. Up close, he looked different. Smaller, somehow. Vulnerable. "Mr. Armstrong," the man said, his voice shaking. "Can I talk to you?" Louis nodded. "Come in." The man entered, his hat in his hands. He looked at the floor, unable to meet Louis's eyes. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "What I did was wrong. I don't know why I did it. I've been angry. At everything, at life. And I took it out on you. I'm sorry." Louis stood up and did, something that shocked everyone in the room. He extended his hand. "What's your name?" The man looked up, surprised. Jack Morrison." Louis shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jack. Thank you for coming back here. Takes courage to apologize." Jack's eyes filled with tears again. "You were right. About everything. I am hurting. My wife left me last month. I lost my job. I've been drinking too much. I came to your show tonight because I was angry and wanted to feel powerful by putting someone else down. But you..." He trailed off, overwhelmed. Louis put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "We all hurt, Jack, every single one of us. The question is what we do with that hurt. Do we pass it on, or do we transform it into something else?" Jack nodded, unable to speak. Louis continued, "You know what I do with my hurt. I play. Every note that comes out of this trumpet carries some of my pain. But in the playing, the pain becomes something beautiful, something that connects me to other people. That's the magic of music. It transforms suffering into art." The two men talked for another 10 minutes. When Jack left, he was a different person than when he'd entered. Not completely healed, but changed. He'd been seen, heard, understood, and that made all the difference. The story of what happened that night at the Blue Note spread quickly through Memphis. By the next day, it was in the newspapers. Jazz legend turns heckler into believer with compassionate response. The article described the incident and quoted people who'd been there. Within a week, the story had spread nationally. Radio shows talked about it. Other musicians referenced it in interviews. Louis Armstrong had done it again, not through music alone, but through his humanity. In the weeks and months that followed, Louis received hundreds of letters. Most were from people thanking him for his example, for showing that strength didn't mean aggression, that power didn't mean dominance, that the most effective way to defeat mockery was with compassion. One letter particularly moved Louis. It was from a teacher in Ohio. "Dear Mr. Armstrong, I read about what happened in Memphis. I teach high school, and I deal with bullies every day. Students who hurt others because they're hurting inside. Your response to that man gave me a new way to approach these situations. Instead of just punishing bullies, I'm trying to understand them, to see their pain, and it's working. Thank you for showing us a better way." Louis kept that letter for the rest of his life, because it confirmed something he'd always believed. Music was powerful, but compassion was transformative. As for Jack Morrison, the man who'd mocked Louis that night, he later told his story to a local newspaper. "That night changed my life," he said. "I went to that club as a broken, angry man. I left as someone who'd been given a second chance. Louis Armstrong could have destroyed me. He could have had me thrown out. He could have humiliated me. Instead, he saw me, really saw me, and in that seeing, he saved me." Jack went on to get help for his drinking. He found a new job. He reconnected with his estranged wife, and they slowly rebuilt their relationship. Years later, when Louis Armstrong died in 1971, Jack Morrison traveled to New York for the funeral. He stood among thousands of mourners, tears streaming down his face, holding a sign that simply read, "Thank you for seeing me." This story became part of Louis Armstrong's legend, not because of the music, though that was extraordinary, but because of the humanity, the wisdom, the choice to respond to mockery with compassion. Throughout his career, Louis faced countless moments like this. People who tried to diminish him, who questioned his talent, who mocked his style, and every time, Louis chose the high road. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. In interviews later in his life, Louis was sometimes asked about that night in Memphis. "Mr. Armstrong, how did you stay so calm when that man mocked you?" He always gave the same answer. "Because I remembered something my mama told me when I was a boy. She said, 'Yo, Louis, hurt people, hurt people. When someone's mean to you, it's usually because they're in pain. Don't add to their pain. Show them something different.' That night in Memphis, I just followed Mama's advice. That philosophy defined Louis Armstrong's approach to life. In a world that often chose conflict, Louis chose connection. In situations that called for anger, Louis offered understanding. When faced with mockery, Louis responded with grace. Today, over 70 years after that night at the Blue Note, the lesson remains relevant. We live in a world full of Jack Morrisons. People hurting, people lashing out, people trying to feel big by making others feel small. Louis Armstrong showed us another way, a way of responding that doesn't escalate conflict but transforms it, a way of seeing beyond the behavior to the pain underneath, a way of choosing compassion over condemnation. The Blue Note Club in Memphis closed in the 1960s, but the memory of that March night in 1948 lived on. Old-timers in Memphis still tell the story. Musicians reference it as an example of grace under pressure. Teachers use it to illustrate conflict resolution. And anyone who heard the story found something in it that spoke to their own experiences. Because we've all been mocked. We've all faced people who tried to diminish us. And we've all had to choose how to respond. Louis Armstrong, on that stage in Memphis, showed us the power of choosing compassion. That March evening wasn't just about one man and one heckler. It was about all of us. About the choice we face every day between reacting and responding. Between escalating and de-escalating. Between seeing people as enemies or as fellow humans struggling with their own pain. Louis Armstrong made his choice, and in doing so, he changed not just one man's life, but everyone who heard the story. He reminded us that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about maintaining your dignity while extending compassion to those who try to strip you of it. As the sun set on March 17, 1948, Louis Armstrong left the Blue Note exhausted but fulfilled. The questions that had plagued him earlier about whether his approach was right, whether smiling and performing made a difference, those questions had been answered, not through philosophy or debate, but through action, through one moment of choosing compassion over anger, through seeing a hurt man and responding with healing instead of harm. That night proved what Louis had always believed but sometimes doubted. That music was more than entertainment. That performance was more than technique. That his presence on stages in clubs and venues across America mattered not just because he played beautifully, but because he embodied something essential: dignity, grace, humanity. Louis boarded the train the next day, heading to his next show, but he carried something with him, a renewed sense of purpose, a confirmation that his path, though difficult and sometimes questioned, was the right one. He would continue to smile, continue to perform, continue to be Satchmo, but now he knew with certainty that behind that smile was something powerful, something transformative, something that could take a broken, angry man and show him another way to be. That was Louis Armstrong's gift. Not just the music, magnificent as it was, but the humanity, the wisdom, the ability to see beyond the surface to the soul underneath. And on that March night in Memphis, 1948, 200 people witnessed that gift. They saw a master musician and a master human being, someone who could play the highest notes and reach the deepest hearts, someone who understood that true artistry wasn't just technical skill, but emotional intelligence, someone who knew that the most powerful response to hate wasn't more hate, but love. Jack Morrison never forgot that night. He told his children about it, his grandchildren. He carried the memory of Louis Armstrong's compassion through his entire life. And every time he faced someone angry, someone hurtful, someone lashing out, he remembered Louis's words, "Hurt people, hurt people." He tried to follow Louis's example, to see the pain, to respond with compassion, and in doing so, he multiplied Louis Armstrong's gift. One moment of grace extended through decades, touching countless lives. That's legacy. That's immortality. Not fame or fortune or awards, but impact. The ripples of one choice spreading outward endlessly, changing the world one heart at a time. Louis Armstrong understood this. He lived it, and on March 17, 1948, in a small club in Memphis, Tennessee, he showed us all what it looks like when music and humanity become one, when art and compassion merge. When the highest note isn't played on a trumpet, but lived in the space between anger and understanding. That's the Louis Armstrong the world needs to remember. Not just Satchmo the entertainer, but Louis the human, the man who could face mockery with grace, who could see pain beneath aggression, who could transform a moment of potential conflict into a lesson in humanity. Tonight, somewhere, someone is being mocked, diminished, attacked, and they have a choice: react or respond, escalate or transform, follow anger or choose compassion. Louis Armstrong showed us the way, not through preaching, through living, through one moment in Memphis when he could have lashed out but chose to reach out instead. And in that choice, he didn't just change one man's life. He showed all of us what we could be if we're brave enough, compassionate enough, human enough. That's the power of Louis Armstrong, a power that transcends time, space, and even death. A power that lives on every time someone chooses grace over grudge, understanding over anger, love over hate. Thank you, Louis, for the music, for the wisdom, for the example, for showing us that the highest note we can ever reach isn't played on an instrument. It's played in our hearts, in our choices, in our moments of decision between the easy path and the right one. You chose right, always, and in doing so, you lit a path for the rest of us to follow, forever.